Welcome to American Medicine Today. I'm Kimberly Bonati alongside Ethan Youker and world-renowned orthopedic surgeon Dr. Alfred Bonati. Exciting show lined up. Let's get straight to it. A new documentary chronicles one man's arduous journey back to wellness through nutrition and lifestyle choices rather than mainstream medical community's stubborn reliance on drugs and medication. Joining us to discuss is Mitchell Thompson, founder of Self-Sustained Training, author of several books, and filmmaker behind How Keto Cured My Crohn's documentary. Now take us back to November of 2023. You were hospitalized with what you really thought was the flu, but that wasn't the case, was it?
Last November, I thought I just had the stomach flu. I had all the symptoms of what seemed to just be the stomach flu. And it was so debilitating with the cramping, the vomiting, all of the symptoms that come with the flu. And it was so debilitating, I ended up going to the hospital. After 4 days of being in the hospital, I was told by the GI surgeons at the time that without having a colonoscopy done, they assumed that I was experiencing Crohn's disease. And for those that are unaware, Crohn's disease is an inflammatory bowel disorder where your intestines are essentially super inflamed. The result of that is a bunch of consequential adverse effects like the worst cramping you could ever imagine, these sort of bloating. I couldn't eat food. I lost over almost 50 pounds. It was more so a result of bad lifestyle choices, and it seemed like just a bad luck of the draw.
They're blaming your development of Crohn's on bad lifestyle choices. Right. I mean, what was it like to get a diagnosis like that when you're somebody who is basically at the peak of physical health?
Yeah.
It was more so confusing than anything. So when they told me that my lifestyle was an implicating factor, they didn't really give me any details as to what was the lifestyle factors that implicated it. But I wasn't aware of the underlying sort of behind the scenes effects that those certain lifestyle choices led to, namely the overconsumption of sugar and starches. And when the doctors told me that, no, it wasn't the sugar or the starches, it must have been something else. It was probably just genetic. And if you drink alcohol, that could also contribute to it, or if you drink coffee. And I don't drink alcohol or coffee. So for me in particular, with regards to the Crohn's diagnosis, the only thing I could assume is that it had something to do with the chronic sugar and the chronic processed foods that I was consuming frequently enough to inevitably implicate my immune system.
What were the doctor's advice? Were they telling you, here, take this pill, here's the newest medication that can help you with a slew of side effects?
I was able to audio document and record the conversation between not only one GI specialist, but two different GI specialists. That the only way for me to remedy my illness, because there is no cure for Crohn's, is to be on an immunosuppressant drug for the rest of my life that would essentially decrease my immune system. The only thing that would be protecting my body from any sort of incoming viruses, bacteria, or infection. And they said the only way to remedy it was through making sure that I was on one of these immunosuppressant drugs. And I had done enough research at the time, and I'd learned that at the end of the day, there has to be a dietary implication on it. So I ended up going down that route rather than going through the medical intervention.
Take it from the point where you were laid up in bed for weeks at a time, and you lost that near 50 pounds. And kind of walk us through that journey of getting your health and wellness in order. What did you discover?
When I wrote my book, I knew that metabolism is essentially the main reason why most Americans are unhealthy, let alone most people in the world nowadays, because of how America or the Western world has standardized diet and nutrition guidelines for the majority of people. I knew that inflammation and inflammatory foods was going to be something that I had to just work around. And so being bedridden all day, not being able to train clients, not being able to hardly even walk around the house, my days consisted of research, analysis of that research, and then essentially experimenting with myself with the conclusions of that research.
Well, and so you obviously, you changed your diet, and once you, as Kimberly mentioned, you were bedridden, once you were back on your feet and ready to exercise and change your diet, how long did it take to bulk back up and start feeling better and getting back to the old Mitchell, I guess?
It was so I followed the doctor's protocol because I didn't want to completely throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I followed the doctor's protocol. And in the documentary, you'll see they recommended that I consume fiber, but then another doctor said, don't eat fiber. And then a third doctor said, it doesn't really matter what type of fiber you eat, because as somebody who knows nutrition, I know there's two different types of fiber. You have soluble and insoluble fiber. So when they were telling me to eat fiber, the ones that were promoting it versus the one doctor that said don't eat fiber, I was questioning, well, do I eat soluble or insoluble? And they said they didn't even know the difference between the two. And it wasn't until after 2 weeks of following their protocol, after doing enough due diligence, learning about the exact protocols I could follow, where I ended up learning that I needed to get rid of sugars and starches nearly completely. After eating only ground beef, water, and salt for a single week, I started feeling relief of my symptoms. All of my symptoms that were debilitating me started clearing up. And over time, after about 3 weeks of enduring that strict, no sugar, no carb, no starch diet, I started feeling energized enough. I gained about 5 to 10 pounds back to where I could start implementing a more ardent protocol.
Unbelievable journey. Now, how can people learn more about what you did and your story?
The documentary in and of itself it stands as a testament for anybody with IBD or autoimmune disorders. Fundamentally, they can see exactly what I did. In the documentary, it tracks from the moment I got sick until the very end, 5 months later, when I was able to recover. I followed everything that I had already written about in my book. So everything in my book, I have a shopping list in the back. I have approved foods versus non-approved foods. So I followed that protocol. I just had to diminish the load of carbs, starches, and sugars that I allow most people to consume if they're not debilitated by an autoimmune.
Well, thank you so much for being on the program. Mitchell Thompson, founder of Self-Sustained Training and author of several books and filmmaker behind How Keto Cured My Crohn's Disease.
Thank you for having me.
Stay tuned. We'll have more after the break. You're watching American Medicine Today.
The loss of coordination in my legs, I'd trip over my feet, end up flat in the concrete. Dr. Bonati to me was God sent. Walk like that no longer. I don't remember how long. I didn't have to make a massive lifestyle change. I noticed today that I could sit and stand up without a cane. I would have to give it excellent and above my expectations.
Visit AskBonati.com.
I'm Rolando Quiros, aka Buddha. I'm a sales professional. Actually was a bartender for a long time as well. Hobbies, martial arts is definitely one of them. I've studied Kali, Jeet Kune Do, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I like lifting weights. I like going into the gym and kind of zoning out.
After a workout session, Rolando's life suddenly changed.
When I was training one time, I just felt a slight twinge in my back. It caused concern because then it started radiating down the back of my leg, and progressively it got worse and worse and worse. And it was definitely like a burning, radiating pain down the back of my hamstring is where I felt it the most. It progressively got worse with time and just started keep creeping down my leg, and then literally wrapped around the front of my knee, down the front of my shin, and then up into my foot, which was, I walked with a pretty bad limp for I want to say 5-6 months. I was in a lot of pain. Even sitting down for long periods of time was painful. So trying to work was definitely difficult. Couldn't focus because of the pain. Couldn't work out because, the pain was just too much. So just pretty much put my life on hold.
He tried conservative treatments, but nothing provided him with more than temporary relief.
I've done a couple of things like, chiropractic care. Actually, I had something called an MUA done, which is a manipulation under anesthesia. And that actually did really well for about a year. But then the pain started coming back and just progressively got worse.
Realizing he needed to do more to resolve his pain, he underwent surgery at another facility, only to have the pain return a short time later.
I went in. They did the MRIs, they did everything, seemed like they knew what they were doing. And so I had the first initial surgery, and that alleviated a lot of the pain. And so slowly started getting back into working out, and then the pain just got progressively worse again and just came back. I could barely walk. I had a really bad limp, and when it got to the point where it went down the front of my shin and up into my foot and caused that much pain is when I kind of knew that I had to look at a different alternative or maybe a different clinic.
That's when a friend suggested that he should reach out to the Bonati Spine Institute.
He was here in Tampa Bay, so I literally reached out and set an appointment, and I went to the clinic, and very welcoming. Those guys were awesome. I had MRIs on CD, so I took those to him. But even before he even looked at him, he had me walk around the office and had me sit down and said, like, I'm gonna say some things to you, and don't answer me until I'm done. And basically he's like, this is happening, this is what you feel, and everything he said was spot on. And it's like, look, you have an issue that is gonna require this. The fact that he was the only doctor, because there was 2 other doctors I saw before I saw him. So he was like my third opinion. This is the guy I need to go to. This is the guy that's gonna get it done and get me fixed. And again, I so happy that I did, and it's probably the best decision I ever made.
Rolando underwent the targeted Bonati Spine Procedures 9 years ago.
It was a little nerve-wracking, but they made me feel comfortable. They made me feel everything was going to be fine. And then actually being able to be to participate in the surgery itself and be able to identify where the pain was different, and it was easy. It was very easy. It made it really comfortable for them and for me. It was definitely a different experience for sure. And the fact that I could participate and be like, yeah, that's where the pain is. And then just to feel them cut that out and just an instant relief was amazing.
After his procedures, Rolando was told he needed to walk to aid his body in recovering.
I didn't need any braces, didn't need any canes, nothing like that. The physical therapy was just make sure you're walking at least every couple hours. So I would literally walk around my block 3 or 4 times.
Now, nearly a decade after his exclusive Bonati Spine Procedures, Rolando is still lifting weights, practicing martial arts, and enjoying everyday life pain-free.
Feel great, feel good. I can walk, I could dance. I work out 5-6 days a week. I would recommend Bonati Spine Institute. Absolutely. Without any hesitation.
Left upper cut. Good. 1, 2, ha! That's it.
To see more stories of recovery just like this, search for the Bonati Spine Institute on YouTube, Rumble, Apple's App Store, Google's Play Store, Roku, and Amazon's Fire TV. Welcome back to American Medicine Today. So a newly released book called Diary of a Dying Girl is an updated version of a story that we covered several years ago regarding the life of Mallory Smith, a young woman who refused to be defined by her chronic illness. And joining us to discuss is her mother, returning guest Diane Smith, who contributed to that memoir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
For anyone who had missed that prior discussion the first time around, why don't you tell us about your daughter, Mallory? She had cystic fibrosis, is that correct?
She has cystic fibrosis, but what I have learned in the past 5 years traveling and speaking about her first book is that what actually killed her was a resistant bacterial infection, and that is called AMR, for antimicrobial resistance. And what's happened is that her book and her story and her writing have become relevant to so many more people as we understand that superbugs like MRSA and Pseudomonas and many of the other ones, staph infections, are killing millions of people, and we have an urgent global crisis called AMR.
She had a great positive outlook, and even though getting sort of a seemingly terminal diagnosis, she wanted to just live happy, and I believe those were her words. How did she go about living happy with such a diagnosis shadow hanging over her head?
I think what she tried to do was focus on the people in her life and to prioritize her love interests, her friendships, her family, and not what the small stuff that so many people get caught up in. I think when you're dealing with life and death issues, you realize that small things just don't matter. And we tried to put joy in every day. On days that she was healthy, it might be a hike or something ambitious, but when she got sicker, it was listening to a song or having a really good fresh brewed cup of coffee or sitting with a friend and hearing about their life.
And it had to be devastating to realize that she passed so shortly after receiving, what was it, a double lung transplant?
She received a double lung transplant, and then when things started to go south, which means that the infection in her lung was starting to take over again because it hadn't been completely eradicated, my husband worked hard to try to get her phage therapy, which at the time was not approved by the FDA and was not available. And since that time, there are now many centers in the country working on phage therapy because resistant bacteria is a huge problem. It's also relevant in war. We have these wars that are happening in Israel and Gaza and Ukraine, and there's so many infections that are running rampant. And then they come off the battlefield and they go into a hospital, and then a nurse goes home and she takes care of her husband, and her husband gets on a plane and flies to the United States. So there's a huge problem with resistant bacteria, and we're using her story and her book to draw awareness for that.
As Kimberly mentioned at the top, Diary of a Dying Girl is an updated version of, I believe it was Salt in My Soul. What new, updates from the diaries? I know you contributed a segment or a chapter.
It goes more into sort of the raw, true feelings of a young adult as she goes through her coming of age. There's boys and there's drinking, and there's a lot of issues like body image, things that everybody relates to. Any young woman going through this phase of life, and any parent wanting to read about it, will really find her insights quite remarkable. And I also think Salt in My Soul, that title was chosen because we were focusing on cystic fibrosis and the disease that she had. But the truth is, we now understand that her story is so much more widely applicable. And Diary of a Dying Girl tells you exactly what it's about. It's about the words of a woman who's both facing her mortality at the same time she's really trying to embrace life fully.
And talk a little bit about your segment about the latest treatments for cystic fibrosis, if you would.
Well, there's a drug called Spycasta that people who have cystic fibrosis are now able to get. So for many, many people, it is no longer a death sentence, unfortunately. For Mallory, she was not able to get it in time, but it's an amazing, amazing drug, and so much research has happened. We're really focusing now on superbugs, resistant bacteria, and phage therapy is the treatment that could have potentially saved Mallory's life, and that's what we use the profits from the book and the sale of the movie about her life are going to, because unfortunately, drug companies don't really want to fund antibiotic research because it has a short shelf life and because it becomes resistant quickly. They really want to invest in drugs like Viagra and Lipitor and things that you can take for the rest of your life. So we're trying to raise awareness for the need to incentivize drug companies to invest in these really important drugs, because what they're saying is that the superbug crisis threatens to undermine modern medicine, because if you go in for a hip replacement and you pick up an infection, it can kill you. The hip replacement is fine. It's the other stuff. And Mallory puts a face to this problem. And that's why I'm speaking worldwide about this issue. It's really important.
We need to start to see that everybody who takes antibiotics, they need to be prudent. They need to use it properly and not in excess. We treat everybody with some sort of an antibiotic. Everybody, you have cold, you have an antibiotic. You have a pain, you have an antibiotic. And repeating the use of the antibiotics, they are going to create themselves that antibiotic becomes now resistant because it's creating a treatment to a microorganism that is going to mutate. And that mutation is going to create something to defend themselves against that antibiotic.
Well said.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back to talk more about Diary of a Dying Girl. You're watching American Medicine Today.
I think everybody was shocked, like, really, you had surgery today? I had a drain tube. I was at my desk doing payroll for 200 employees, worked till night, got up, went to bed.
Actually, the recovery was great. I mean, I really immediately felt the difference. I was able to go back to work within a couple of days.
The progress after each procedure was amazingly good. The recovery, all told, has been phenomenal.
We went to the Bonati Institute, and that was the turning point in my life. This type of surgery is so much more advanced, and the recovery time is so much less that it's just a no-brainer. If you've got pain, go to Bonati.
That afternoon, when it was done, I actually felt so much better already.
6 days after surgery, I was back in the gym, slowly but surely working my way back to fighting, back to basically 100% of fighting, you know? So 6 days, and everybody was in awe. Like, didn't you just get out of surgery? I'm like, yeah, I feel great. And like, okay, let's see how you do. And I was rolling with everybody, and I'm in the advanced class. So that sounds a lot right there.
First time I came in here was Monday, and today is Thursday. I've had 2 surgeries and am doing fantastic. I'm still in shock that I can walk. That's all within 4 days.
Bonati succeeds where others fail. Welcome back to American Medicine Today. We're continuing our discussion about Diary of a Dying Girl. What takeaway do you want listeners and viewers to have about your daughter, and where can they learn more?
The insights that Mallory captures in her writings over 10 years, really, I can't possibly share them in a 10-minute interview. So I hope that many people take advantage of the opportunity to read the rare and raw insights of a young woman who was facing the worst thing you could possibly face and somehow still managed to live happy.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Diane Smith, who contributed to the book Diary of a Dying Girl. Thank you for being on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of American Medicine Today. Make sure you check us out anytime, anywhere by downloading our American Medicine Today TV show, available on all your streaming devices. If you have any comments or questions, contact us at the numbers below, or you can tweet at Dr. Bonati using the hashtag American Medicine Today or hashtag AMT. We would like to hear from you.